just completely terrified of what is happening right now in terms of missiles dropping every few moments, to also terrified of what does tomorrow bring when there's less water, there's less food, there's no fuel, there's no medical supplies. So it's a mix of fearing for your life, but also fearing, in worry of your survival.
They went to Gaza to visit relatives. They're from Dundee. Are they used
Yes,
to...
my father's Palestinian.
Yeah, are they used to the conditions in Gaza? Because people have this conception of Gaza as being extremely dangerous, but this is where many Palestinians live. So there's a population of 2 million, and they go about their day-to-day life. This is a noticeable difference. What have they taught to you about what life is like in Gaza?
My brother lives in Gaza. He's lived through the wars. He is an ER doctor, and at first he was just concerned about getting my parents out of Gaza. He said they're not used to it. We have to get them out as soon as possible. But in the last few days, he has said that what he is seeing and experiencing is nothing like ever before. It's completely terrifying. What's happening at the hospitals with not enough beds, with not enough supplies. We can't get ambulances to people. It's a real desperate situation, and they're all very scared.
Yeah, Gazans used to living under threat, but nothing like this. Have you spoken to your wider family there? You talk about your brother, your parents, obviously they're visiting, now stuck as Gaza is under blockade.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so my aunt and uncle, their new home, only 6 months in it, has been destroyed. A cousin's home has been completely destroyed. Thankfully, they were not in the home at the time. A very dear family friend of ours has just found out that their nephew and brother-in-law and niece, who was only a few years old, have died in the Derabala attacks that we saw this afternoon. So it's really, my cousin sent me a voicemail last night saying, Nadia, this is my last voicemail to you, because we're going to run out of internet and electricity. I won't have battery for my phone. Please just pray for us.
Oh, Nadia, what is it like to receive those kind of messages from your family? Because there will be so many Palestinians not living over there, here in the UK, whose families and friends are going through the same thing.
You just feel completely helpless, hopeless, despair. I'm trying not to get into complete and utter despair, talking to yourself and being on social media and seeing, support for the Palestinian people and having the ability to tell their stories and what is happening to them feels like a responsibility that I have, and I can just tell the world about what's happening to them, because it feels like a blackout in terms of they're going to have no phones soon. There's no international journalists. It's going to be harder to know in real time, especially what is happening. Yeah,
it really does feel like a race against time, because presumably your parents are using mobile phones, and at some point the battery is going to run out, and that in a way becomes the not knowing, which is so much worse.
Yeah, that's why this afternoon my dad had turned his phone off to conserve the battery, and I couldn't get in touch with him. It's the not knowing. My brother, his phone doesn't work at all now because all the telecommunications have been cut. So he's at the hospital dealing, and travelling and outside, where it's even more dangerous than just sitting in the home. And I have no ways to connect with him to find out if he's okay. Those moments, those hours, and you're just searching online for anyone's Instagram that is there, that is sharing what is happening on the ground. But that will become less and less as the days go on.
And Nadia, it's important to remind people that even though Gazans were told to leave if they could before the Israeli retaliation, the people in Gaza really have nowhere to go. When we say stuck, they are stuck. It's now blockaded. There is literally no way in or out. How can you give people a sense of that? Because it really is quite an unusual situation in global geography to have this small strip of land that is the size of the Isle of Wight, 2 million people living there, and the situation they find themselves in, the circumstances in which they live.
My parents tried to get out when told to leave Gaza. They went to the Foreign Office, we filled out paperwork, and there was a question, do you have any non-British nationals with you? My brother and my nephew's nieces aren't British, and the newest baby, 8 weeks old, has no paperwork whatsoever because he's a baby. So I spoke to my brother and I said, if there's any chance I can request that you can get out. But they know that there's no hope. Like, my parents have British passports and they're stuck there without any safe passage to get to the border. And when they were told to leave, the border was then bombed. If they had been 20 minutes earlier, they would have been there as the bombing happened. So there's no safe exit from the Gaza Strip. For my parents with British passports, let alone the 2 million have no passport to another country, to get out. I've not seen my brother in 10 years. That's a normal Palestinian story because I couldn't travel to see him. This month I was supposed to go and visit him with my parents. I didn't go because of diaries, but Palestinians are cut off from their families all the time for decades because you cannot travel freely if you live in the Gaza Strip.
To the world, this feels different. To people living in Gaza, this will feel very different, this new war, as it's being called by Israel.
Mm-hmm.
What's your fear about what's going to happen, Nadia?
My fear is that Medical Aid for Palestine said within the first 48 hours they used $500,000 worth of medical aid, to the point that their warehouses are now empty. We're now 3 days past that point with no hope of medical equipment coming into Gaza. My fear is that past death, my family dying, is that they will lose everything. They will not have food, they will not have water, and they'll be staying in tents. And that, for me, I can't say it's not equal, but it's a huge fear. The thought of my little niece, who's 4 and full of life, in a refugee camp with no food, with no water, really, really hurts, and it's a real fear. Also, what does a military invasion look like? We're seeing troops at the borders. What does that mean for 2 million people? What will happen when those troops go into Gaza? And these are all questions that myself and others don't have any answers for. Your mind can start to spiral to the worst possible places.
Nadia, and in that, you are not alone. As I said, we've been speaking to so many families on Sky News in similar situations. There has been talk of humanitarian corridors, and your husband is the First Minister of Scotland, and I know that that's something he is pushing the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, to support. What hope is there of that? Because this war is just at the start, fears of a ground offensive any time now. The window for humanitarian corridors seems to be narrowing, if not closed completely. What are you hearing about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now's not the discussion about whether we should or should not open a humanitarian corridor. We have to open a humanitarian corridor now. These people are in a dire situation and they'll start to die, not from the bombs, but from the fact that they can't be treated. Yes, my husband is the First Minister of Scotland, and I think he was one of the first leaders to say that there needs to be humanitarian aid, there needs to be safe passage for those that can leave to leave, and he had written to the Foreign Secretary with those suggestions, strong suggestions that collective punishment is unjustifiable. And, I would hope that these messages are getting through. Organisations are working extremely hard. They have aid sitting ready to go, but right now it's a closed military zone, so therefore nothing can get in.
Nadia, this is so personal for you, and you are using your platform to highlight what is going on, because I think what we have been talking about on Sky News over the course of the last few days is how civilians on both sides of this conflict, in Israel and on the Palestinian side, are suffering because of this. And there is a vein of thought that the innocent Palestinians in Gaza who are being bombed are being marginalised in the talk of the victims of this. Is that something you want to highlight? I mean, when I say marginalised, in the context of what Hamas, the attacks, the horrendous, heinous crimes that Hamas carried out in Israel, a lot of the talk has been about the victims in Israel. Do you think enough focus is being put on what's happening to those in Gaza, those people who have lived there for generations, who have nothing to do with the politics?
Civilians are being killed in Gaza right now as we speak. My family are doctors, they're lawyers, they're teachers, they're engineers, they're caught up in this, they're completely innocent, and we need to help them to get to safety, to protect them and have the correct resources, which are basic human rights of water and food and medical supplies. That should be the most urgent item being discussed, about how do we get that to 2.2 million people.
Nadia, thank you for your time. I know it's difficult to talk about, but you're using your platform to raise awareness of what those trapped in Gaza are going through. Nadia El-Nakla, thank you.
Thank you.